Okay.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to those people wherever you are in the world. We have a very extensive community gathering today to come to listen to a talk from London Buddhist Vihara. About 170 people registered online. So we've also got a very full house today at the London Buddhist Vihara as well. Okay, so I'm going to switch our record button very shortly on. Just to say to everyone online, please, if you could mute yourselves from audio, but switch on your video. It makes a far more interesting experience on Zoom. I'm just about to put the recording on. Okay. So this event is being recorded for later rewatching on YouTube. Right. So, firstly, I'd like to ask my good colleague, Graham Dixon, please, to tell us about our speaker today.
Thank you, Amal. Venerable Mahasangha, and audiences both here and online, good evening, morning, or afternoon, whichever of those applies. A few weeks ago, I had the extraordinary privilege and pleasure of visiting Oxford and passing time there with Ajahn Canda at Anakampa Grove. Apart from enjoying the meal and conversation, spending time with the community was a valuable reminder that from the very outset, the Buddha's intention was to create a fourfold assembly, women and men, ordained and lay. And therefore it's a privilege to welcome her together with Samanera Upachala to the London Buddhist Vihara this evening. The name of the community, Apukampa, well, I admit to looking it up, and it's a word with similar roots to English terms like sympathy and compassion. But in Pali, it has an additional sense, a sense of movement, somehow shifting to come alongside, somehow even trembling with the other, conveying a profound sense of empathy. And the word often occurs in the Pali canon, notably when the first followers of the Buddha set off to wander out of compassion for the world. So the establishment of Anukampa is therefore both a pioneering project and one with deep roots in the earliest years of the Buddhist tradition. As a young woman, Venerable Canda describes having many questions and devising a plan to head off to India in search of some broader horizons. It was there in 1996 that she first encountered Buddhist teachings, later undertaking retreats in the Vipassana tradition taught by Goenka. Some years followed, living in Asia during time in India, Nepal, Myanmar, South Korea, and probably countries I don't know about, before she actually ordained in Myanmar in 2006, and then received full bhikkhuni ordination in 2014. Her subject this evening is freeing the mind, tranquility and insight, samatha and vipassana. It would be perfectly possible to spend hours in abstract theoretical debates about the relationship of the two practices. I recall writing an extended essay on this very subject. However, this evening, we can expect something grounded and relevant as the Venerable Canda speaks on this subject. When I visited Anukampa Grove, we were encouraged by her in a reflection before the meal to appreciate and feel the silence of the place. Chiswick tends to be a little more animated, but clearly these practices can speak directly to us wherever we may find ourselves. We are indeed very fortunate this evening to hear Ajahn Canda share her reflections drawn from many years of dedicated practice and teaching. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Graham. I'd like now to ask Venerable Bogada Sila Vimala, the head monk of London Buddhist Vihara, and Chief Sanganayata, just to say a few words, please. Bhante.
Thank you, Mark. I would like to welcome you all for the meeting today. The talk, as Graham explained, Ajahn Canda. We have met several times. It is a privilege for us to listen to you today. And she has come with Sister Pachala. Both sisters are very welcome in this evening. And also her topic has been said, freeze in the mind. We all have a lot of papanchas, a lot of thoughts in our mind. So how can we have a good freedom in mind? We are expecting to listen to you today. I'm not going to give a long welcome speech. You may warmly, everyone is very welcome to the meeting today. Thank you very much.
The sound is very low.
Okay, so thank you very much. Might be a little on the loud side. Thank you very much for your warm welcome. Thank you to Venerable Sila Vimala and to the Venerable Sangha here today for inviting me. It's a great privilege and honour to be here and to see so many people who've come to listen to the Dhamma, both here and online. So it's a real joy and honour. And I'm reminded by my teacher Ajahn Brahm that this is his local temple. He likes to say it's my manor, which means it's kind of his early Buddhist stomping ground. This is where he started to learn the Dhamma many years ago. So I kind of feel his support with me today, and it's slightly nerve-wracking to be here, but also, as I say, a great privilege. So yes, I hope you enjoy the talk. Thank you to Graham for giving me a wonderful introduction. I don't think I need to introduce myself any further. But for those who've just arrived and for all of us here to listen, shall we just sit for 5 minutes just to quieten ourselves, to calm our mind and maybe to settle in our bodies so that we are ready to hear the Dhamma. It gives me great joy to be with so many people and to be able to take a few moments of peace. And great awe in the human capacity to live in harmony and peace. With people we maybe have never met before. So just allowing yourself to feel grounded in your body, regarding your body as a friend. And sensing the gift of being with so many other spiritual friends, gathered simply to try to develop our minds in peace and wisdom and compassion. And just allowing experience to be as it is. Allowing the mind to settle and notice what's arising for you without judgment, but with a sense of curiosity and compassion. if you're enjoying the peace inside, you can continue to practice with your eyes closed and take in the Dhamma. Or if you wish, you can gently open your eyes, keeping a part of the mind inside, staying mindful, present, and open throughout the talk. So, I hope everybody is well. So today's theme is still a little bit loud, probably. We could turn it down slightly. Can everybody hear okay? I think it's got a bit of echo on it. Yeah? Super. So today's theme is on samatha and vipassana, which in brief mean the calming and the clear seeing of the mind. So samatha is calm or tranquility, serenity of mind, and vipassana refers to the quality of discernment, investigation, penetration of mind, the wisdom faculty of the mind. And quite often these are considered two techniques of meditation. And I think this is what I also thought when I was beginning my practice. So I checked this out at our monastery. Sometimes we have guests staying, and I said to one of my guests, so what do you think of as samatha, and what do you think of as vipassana? And she said to me, well, samatha is trying to keep a hold of the breath, and vipassana is trying not to complain about the aches and pains. And I thought that was quite funny, firstly because it's kind of a reductionist idea, but it's actually an idea that many of us have, and that I think I myself had for many years. And both of them, of course, then involve a little bit of struggle. It's like I'm trying to watch the breath, and now I'm trying to be equanimous and deal with the aches and the pains and develop a sense of wisdom through that somehow. And yet it sort of, this idea reinforces the sense of separation between the two. So in Myanmar, where I started to practice as a nun, and even before then, I was practicing a method called vipassana. So to me, vipassana was synonymous with a technique. And in that method, we had 3 days in the beginning of anapana meditation to develop samadhi, or samatha. And then we had 7 days of practicing observing the physical bodily sensations and the way that these sensations would constantly arise and pass away. And that was called vipassana. So I also thought that these things fitted neatly into different categories. Not only that, but there was a definite sense that one was superior to the other. You know, you practice samatha in order to move on to vipassana and see things as they really are. And samatha is a kind of preliminary that you get over as quickly as you can. You get it over with first, right? Even metta bhavana, which we did at the end, seemed like a little add-on. You know, first you practice anapana, then vipassana, then you share a bit of metta, a bit of loving kindness at the end of the practice. So they seemed very sort of separate and segmented. And, you know, some traditions in Myanmar even said that you don't need any samatha at all. You don't need to calm the mind. You can practice what's known as dry insight. So there was this idea that you could just observe the body and mind processes and develop wisdom that way. You didn't need any samatha. You didn't need any samadhi. So to make it even more complicated, there were 3 different types of jhanas that were taught. One of them was the samatha jhana, one of them was a vipassana jhana, and one of them was something like a transcendental jhana or transcendent jhana. And this was very confusing, because what I found that was happening in my own practice was that through the practice of observing bodily sensations arising and passing, I would also have experiences of calm. I would also have experiences of rapture from time to time, of peace, of serenity, which are traditionally thought of as samatha experiences, experiences of samadhi practice. And when I was practicing observing the breath, which was supposed to be for samadhi, for quietening the mind, I would have insight into the nature of impermanence by observing the breath, and also the nature of non-self. Can we own the breath? Is the breath really mine, or is it an aspect of nature? So this kind of insights would arise. And similarly with the metta practice, I would find that it was deeply productive of insight into the nature, the conditioned nature of perception. When we have loving kindness in our heart, in our mind, the world looks different. The world looks much friendlier, much kinder. Even the people you feel irritated with, suddenly you see all their strengths, all their good qualities. Oh, they didn't mean that. They were just going through a hard time. But when I'm tired, irritable, got out on the wrong side of bed, the first thing a friend says, even a good friend, "Oh, that's so annoying." They always say that. So which one's the reality? Maybe none of those. And so with the metta practice, although, it was certainly quietening the mind and bringing a lot of joy to the mind, I could also see that it led to insight. And I started to doubt that these three could be separate techniques. That we practice vipassana, we practice methods like the
Cannot hear
satipathanas,
anything
the
at all.
satipathanas. Does everybody know what they are? Yeah? Directing mindfulness to 4 particular areas of experience.
No
So
voice
that
at
is
all.
the body, the feelings that we experience, mental or physical, which are pleasant, painful, or somewhere in between.
Cannot hear
The
anything.
mind, whether it's contracted or expanded, and different mental states, and then mental contents, specifically 5 hindrances and the enlightenment factors. They're the most important ones of these. So these are the 4 areas of experience where we tend to assume a sense of self. We tend to
can't
think,
hear
this is me,
at all.
this is mine, I am my body, I am my feelings, or I am my mental states or contents. Yeah, we identify with our thoughts. So, in Myanmar and maybe in other places too,
No sound at all.
practicing satipatthana was seen as synonymous to practicing vipassana, insight. Also, 4 elements meditation was seen as synonymous to that, whereas practicing anapana, practicing metta was seen as samatha practice. And I started realizing this couldn't be the whole
We
picture.
cannot hear
Something
anything.
else was going on. I remember a particular point where I was practicing so much intensive meditation
Cannot
across
hear
many
anything
years.
at
I
all.
used to sit for about 18 hours a day, which my body wouldn't do now at this at this age, ripe old age. And with so much meditation, the mindfulness becomes really bright, really strong, and also there's quite a lot of calm. But I started realizing I was reaching a kind of plateau.
Cannot
And I
hear
went to my
anything.
teacher with a question. I said, I'm practicing vipassana, but is it really vipassana? Or is it actually samatha? Is it actually still in this stage of calming the mind? And he gave a very interesting answer. He said, as long as there's still a sense of self watching everything rising and passing,
No.
still this idea of the one who's watching this, who's somehow free from the nature of impermanence, it's samatha meditation. You're still in the process of calming the mind. So that sort of already started to dispute this idea that the vipassana technique was for insight, or was insight itself. And
Can't hear
gave me
anything.
the sense that all these
can only
methods
see
kind
the-
of combine. And it maybe depends on, where our inclination lies, or where our practice is, where we are in our practice.
Please stop
as to
shouting.
which one we emphasize. And this can be quite a natural process. I met another wonderful teacher who's still a Kalyanamitta, a spiritual friend of mine in Myanmar. And I said to him, I'm aware that things are rising and passing away so quickly. Sometimes it's really hard to keep up with the speed of the change. And yet, the liberating insights are not arising. Why is this? What's happening here? And he gave a lovely simile. He said it's like vipassana is like a knife that you use to cut a carrot. I think he used that example. And Samatha, or calm meditation, especially to the level of jhanas, that's very, very deep states of calm, is like sharpening that knife, so it becomes much, much easier to cut. But there's another even better simile that's similar to that, which is a simile of an axe. So vipassana, insight on its own, it's sharp. You know, it can cut through delusion to some extent, but it's like using a razor blade to cut down a tree. Okay, it's sharp, but it just doesn't have the power. Samadhi or samatha is like using a hammer to take down that tree. It has power, but it's the wrong tool and it's blunt on its own, right? So vipassana and samatha combined, especially deep insight and deep states of calm, samadhi, is like having a honed and heavy axe. The axe has both the power of samadhi that samadhi bestows to the mind, and also that sharpness that it can cut right through. So this is what happens when we develop both. And this is how the Buddha teaches samatha and vipassana in the Buddhist texts. Very, very rarely does he describe them separately, although he does describe them as complementary qualities of the mind that are mutually reinforcing and that work together as equal and indispensable pair, as an equal and indispensable pair. So you don't have one without the other. In fact, both tend to grow together if the practice is truly in line with the Eightfold Noble Path. So today I wanted to discuss how the Buddha described samatha and vipassana in the texts, and how we can apply those in practice through practicing the whole Eightfold Noble Path. The Buddha said that wherever there are enlightened beings, they've become enlightened through the Eightfold Noble Path. Wherever people practice the Eightfold Noble Path, there you'll find enlightened beings. It doesn't matter what their gender is, their sexual orientation. It doesn't matter whether you have one kind of physical ability, one particular neurotype. It doesn't matter your race. Anybody who practices, not even your religion. Do you have to be a Buddhist to get enlightened? As long as you're practicing the Eightfold Noble Path, enlightenment ensues. But you have to practice every factor of that path. It's an eightfold path, not a sevenfold path, not a threefold path, certainly not a onefold path of only vipassana or only samadhi. It simply will not work. So Ajahn Chah apparently used to, I never met Ajahn Chah. I'm sure that some of the monks in this country did. Ajahn Sumedho and some of the monks at Amaravati lived with him for a long time. My teacher Ajahn Brahm lived with him for about 9 years, and he says that Ajahn Chah very rarely spoke of samatha and vipassana. He spoke of bhavana, which means development of the mind. So samatha and vipassana together lead towards development of the mind. And by developing the mind, we incline more and more and more towards complete pacification, complete states of calm, and the highest happiness of nibbana. Nibbana is a state of the perfection of wisdom, the wisdom that overcomes the root defilements of greed, hatred, and delusion. But it's also known as sabbe sankhara samatha, the complete pacification of all conditioned things. The complete calming of sankharas, of will, of doing, controlling, manipulating, of every phenomena that arises. So the two go together. In fact, in another sutta that he gave to Venerable Upali, who was a barber in his lay life but became the expert in the Vinaya, in the rules from the monks and nuns, or the training precepts for monks and nuns, he said that you can know it's the Dhamma. This is the kind of litmus test of whether something is the Dhamma, by whether it leads to upasama, abhinya, and sambodhi. Upasama means calm, deep peace. Upasama is like an intensifier for peace. Deep, deep calm. Abhinya is like the higher knowledges, wisdom, and nibbana. So it has to lead to all three. It has to lead to all three. And then you know it's the Dhamma. If it's leading towards calming your mind and it's leading to more insight, you're on the right track. So there are some passages in the suttas that talk about the distinctive qualities and functions of samatha and vipassana, which is also very interesting, because there we can see how the kind of emotional qualities of the mind and the more cognitive qualities, which are actually experiences that you directly embody, work together. And this is really interesting. There's a little quote in the Anguttaras, and I've written it down here, where the Buddha describes these two complementary qualities. Now notice that I'm saying qualities which have a particular function rather than two techniques. Yeah? As I said, all techniques that work should be developing both samatha and vipassana and leading to nibbana. So this is from the Anguttara 2s, and it's number 310 for those who are interested in the suttas, and I think many of the people on Zoom I know are interested in that. And he says this: monastics, so this is addressed to the bhikkhus, but usually I like to think of that as including the whole fourfold assembly, so it relates to all of us here. The mind is the mind. There are these two principles that share in realization. What two? Samatha and vipassana. When samatha is developed, what purpose is achieved? The mind is developed. Okay? Chitta bhavana. When the mind is developed, what purpose is achieved? Lust is abandoned. When vipassana is developed, what purpose is achieved? Understanding is developed. When understanding is developed, what purpose is achieved? Delusion is abandoned. So see how this is purifying both the emotional and the cognitive, or let's say, I don't really like cognitive, but the wisdom aspects of the mind, or the delusion, we can say, the wrong ways of understanding. And then he says further, monastics, the mind tainted by lust is not released. And usually the word released, vimokkha, is a synonym for the jhanas, so deep states of samadhi. We can't free ourselves from the 5 hindrances to enter those states. Release of the mind is due to the fading away of lust. Release by understanding is due to the fading away of delusion. In other words, vipassana is that investigative quality of the mind that is able to see deeply into the nature of reality in line with the Four Noble Truths, and also draw appropriate conclusions from what it's aware of. And those conclusions must always be in line with the teachings of the Buddha. Yeah? So this is why the Noble Eightfold Path starts with right view. It's inclining our mind towards seeing things the way the Buddha pointed them out. So the two whirl around each other, and I love a simile that my teacher Ajahn gives. He said it's like having a flashlight and a map. You need both to find the treasure. And that treasure, again, is nibbana, right? The highest happiness, ultimate peace. So the flashlight is that which has the power and the illumination, that can really show you what's there. And it can hold its beam on an area of experience for long enough to see the detail. But the map is showing you where that treasure lies. The map is like the teachings of the Buddha. It's like hearing the Dhamma, understanding the Four Noble Truths. It's the Eightfold Noble Path. It shows you where to go. If you don't have a map, you can shine that light. The light can be the strength of a football stadium light, and you're not going to find the treasure because you simply don't know where you're looking, right? This might be one reason why I think these mystic experiences, known as mystic experiences in many traditions, which I think, saints in the Christian tradition, probably the Sufi tradition, probably any tradition, is just a faculty of the human mind that we can experience these states of complete bliss and absorption, deep samadhi, deep stillness. But if we don't have the map, we misinterpret them. So with the map, we know where to look, and then that flashlight enables us to see deeply and find that treasure. If we only have the map also, but we don't have our eyes, we can't see, we'll be fumbling around. We'll find the right place, but we just can't see the treasure. It's right there under our nose. We don't have eyes to see. So again, the two are needed. And the beautiful thing is, in practice, we start to notice that the more calm we are, the more deeply we see. Initially, before we have, really deep insight, we need to see enough to clear the hindrances to deeper meditation, right? So just to see where we're going, just to understand what is wholesome, what is unwholesome, we need to be able to see. So we need a certain level of calm in order to, know what we're doing, basically, yeah? And also to have good virtue, right? Do you notice that if you're busy, if your mind's kind of hurried, if you're really stressed out, you just can't make a good decision on anything, right? I always say, when in doubt, don't. Just don't make life decisions. Don't quit your job. Don't leave your partner. For women, if you happen to be perimenopausal, it's not the right time, okay? You can't see clearly because the hormones and the emotions are all over the place. And it's not your fault. It's completely impersonal. These are physiological processes. But, we need that calm. We need that clarity in order to see clearly what to do. And as we see clearly what to do, as we see how to remove the obstacles, especially the hindrances, the 5 hindrances, which I'll go into soon, then the mind can drop into a deeper level of stillness. So it's like using a simile of a gardener, because we've been planting trees at our Bhikkhuni residence in Oxford. We've been planting some trees, and the builders who were there before left a lot of rubble under the ground, under the grass. So we were digging. It once took 2 hours actually for one of our visitors. I'm not allowed to dig as a bhikkhuni because I might harm the little creatures underground, but they're allowed to dig. So they were digging and coming across so many rocks. And it's like, dig, dig, dig. We go deep, in our samadhi, and then we hit an obstacle, we hit a rock. Then we need to use wisdom. Okay, where's the edge of the rock? How deep is the rock? Is it heavy enough that I can, or light enough that I can pull it out? If you just keep banging away, it's not going to work, right? You're using force, you're not using wisdom power. Ajahn Brahm calls that willpower, not wisdom power. So instead we need to stop, pause, regain that level of calm and understand how to work out how to remove the blockage. And then we can go deeper, we can dig deeper. And this is how it works. We dig, we find an obstacle, wisdom comes in, helps us remove the obstacle. We can dig a little deeper, we can dig a little deeper. And eventually we get to that part of the mind where the seeds of wisdom are buried. The seeds of wisdom are there in the deeper levels of our mind. But we need that capacity of samadhi, of stillness, of depth to the mind to be able to, in a sense, reach those levels of the mind that are sometimes below our subconscious levels and, in a way, help them germinate. They start to germinate. The longer we can expose them to samadhi, the longer we shine that light on those seeds, the warmth, the light of the sun, those seeds start to germinate and grow. The wisdom's there as long as we've heard the teachings. So how do we actually get samadhi and vipassana going in the first place? Where do we begin? And the really most important foundation for the whole Eightfold Path, I would say, other than right view, which is preliminary at first, is virtue. Virtue. Yeah? Virtue is the foundation. It's like you want to build a pyramid. A pyramid, you want to make it high, you want to make it strong. The pyramids in Egypt, I don't even know how ancient they are. Thousands of years, I think. Maybe older than the Buddha, I think. Something like 3,000 years? Yeah. And they're still standing. They're very tall. I went to see them when I was just 18, in the first years of my travel, and they're really impressive. Those pyramids are able to stand for a long time and reach to the sky because the foundation is so wide. That sila is like the foundation. The Buddha says, sila paribhavito samadhi, mahapala hoti mahanisamso. It means samadhi developed with a foundation, with a basis of virtue, is of great fruit and great benefit. He goes on to say, and I only just read this recently, that wisdom with the foundation of samadhi is of great fruit and benefit. Vipassana without samadhi is not as strong. Like I say, it's like using the razor to cut the tree. But if you have, an axe, it has both the penetrative quality of insight, but also the strength, Also that fearlessness, the fearless quality that samadhi bestows in the mind. So the path, the Eightfold Path is threefold. It includes sila, samadhi and panya. That means virtue, stillness or calm states of mind, and also wisdom. And it is sequential. So there are 8 factors, starting with right view, and I'll go through them in a little bit more detail, but as usual I've probably run out of time, so we'll see how far we get. But there's another quote in the suttas where the Buddha says very clearly that these develop in a sequential way. So the quote here is from the Majjhima Nikaya number 117. How well described it is by the Buddha that there are 7 prerequisites of samadhi for the development and fulfillment of right samadhi. So right samadhi is the last factor of the Eightfold Path, and it's the culmination of a lot of calming, but of course combined with insight all the way. What 7? Right view, which is the preliminary insights into the Four Noble Truths, the nature of suffering, and that suffering is universal. Suffering has a cause, it also has an end. Right motivation, or right intention, it's often translated as. Right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, or I prefer right endeavor, and right mindfulness. One-pointedness of mind, describing samadhi here, with the 7 factors as its prerequisites, is called noble right samadhi, with its vital conditions and requisites. So if you want to know why the mind doesn't always get as still as you wish it would, check out whether the other requisites, the vital prerequisites, are in place. And specifically check out your sila, your virtue. Any flaw, any blemish in the virtue, and your mind will be shaken. Your mind will simply not be able to settle. There'll be remorse, there'll be regret, there may be worry. You know, even if we've spoken to somebody in a slightly offhand way, we'll be thinking, maybe I need to say something different next time. And you're thinking, you know, when the mind is thinking, you're far away from samadhi. So the sila needs to be developed beautifully and perfectly in a way that really uplifts and gladdens the mind. And the Buddha said that one with sila, one with the foundation of virtue, experiences what's known as blameless bliss, anavajja sukha. This is the bliss of purity of mind. It's not the happiness of sensuality. And it's really the first major step in the path which provides a foundation for our meditation practice. Yeah, that's the real beginning of letting go and cultivating the mind in wholesome states. So the path is sequential, but it's also holographic, with each aspect of the path containing the rest. Of course, we have to start somewhere, but as we proceed through it, we'll start to find that, you know, for example, if we have better speech, that'll probably ensue in better action, you know. If we think in a more compassionate, loving way, we're much more likely to speak words of loving kindness. If you've been thinking about somebody in an uncharitable way, straight away when you meet them, there's a kind of sense of guilt, isn't there? Or a sense like, you've been kind of priming your mind to think something negative, and you tend to pick up on those negative sides of the person. Whereas when you've been reflecting on their goodness, on their generosity, or maybe, if you can't do that, reflecting that perhaps they are grumpy and perhaps they are sometimes rude, but maybe they're going through something really difficult in life, you know, allowing compassion to arise. The Buddha said, see a person who's angry, see a person who's full of, you know, ill will, as a sick person. They've come down with a terrible disease and they're far away from help. Yeah, they don't have a nurse, they don't have a doctor, they don't have an attendant. They don't have any medicine, they don't have the Buddha's teachings. We have the Buddha's teachings, so at least we have an idea what we're supposed to be doing. Isn't that an incredible gift? Yeah, so each of these factors reinforces the next, and it's great fun to practice them. One of the main purposes of the Eightfold Noble Path is to overcome what is known as the 5 hindrances. And one of my teachers, who's going to be visiting here, I believe, in June, Ajahn, who's sutta expert and a very good practitioner. He calls these 5 hindrances public enemy number 1, but public enemy to your meditation. And the reason for that is because they obscure clear seeing. The Buddha described the 5 hindrances as obscurations of the mind that weaken wisdom and nourish delusion. Delusion is the opposite of wisdom. Wisdom is vidya, delusion is avidya. So we're not able to see things as they are. Those 5 hindrances are sensory desire or interest in the sensory world, aversion, which can be anything from the spectrum of being slightly displeased or even bored, mildly irritated, to full-on rage, anger, hatred. The third one is sloth and torpor, very old-fashioned terms. It really means mental sluggishness and drowsiness of the body. And then the fourth one is like restlessness and worry, again connected to our virtue to some extent, but it can be just that pattern of looking at the worst case scenario. It's very much underpinned by ill will. And lastly, doubt, which makes us confused. We don't know which way to turn. Yeah, it can be doubt about the teachings, doubt about whether the Buddha was really enlightened, whether you should even be practicing meditation. Sometimes we think meditation makes it worse. I was much happier before I started to meditate. I never had to deal with my uncontrollable thoughts. But they were there already. It's just now the eyes of insight are turning on. You're starting to see the problem. And bit by bit you can find a remedy to that. So doubt, it can be confusion about how we're practicing, which method to use. Is it samatha? Is it vipassana? Does it really matter? But is it leading to both insight and calm? Is it helping you in your life? So these are the 5 hindrances. And in a sense, you can say that samatha and vipassana as qualities function throughout the Eightfold Path to start diminishing these hindrances. And as those hindrances diminish, something beautiful starts to happen. What we know as the 7 enlightenment factors start to arise. They're their opposite counterpart. So the 7 enlightenment factors lead us gradually towards full awakening from all suffering, the highest happiness again. So I thought of 2 different similes to explain what I've come to understand as the difference between samatha and vipassana and right samadhi and liberating insight. Again, if we take samatha and vipassana to be almost like verbs, so we're calming and we're starting to see things clearly, right, throughout the practice of the Eightfold Path. The outcome of that is right samadhi and also liberating insight, so that insight is much, much deeper with the foundation of samadhi, as I said before. So the Buddha gives 2 similes about water, and he likens the mind to a body of water. Now, I don't know what kind of body of water your mind looks like right now, but if you have any lust, any craving, sensory desire, the Buddha said it's like having water, maybe a small jug of water, that's dyed. It's dyed a certain colour, maybe pink or green or whatever. It's kind of obscured by a different colour. You're putting on a perception that doesn't really enable you to see things as they are. If you have a mind of ill will, I hope you don't have a mind of ill will to me because I'm talking too much. No? Great. We're doing well. A mind of ill will is like boiling water. Yeah? Hot. Bubbling away. You can't see clearly. You would never see a reflection in that water. Sloth and torpor is like the mind covered with algae. If you've got a pond in your garden, we do actually. It used to be a swimming pool, but nuns don't swim in swimming pools. So we took off the top of it and we want to turn it into a pond. So far there's no algae on it, but algae starts to creep in and we have to clear it away because we can't see clearly. It obscures our reflection again. The next one is restlessness and worry, which is like choppy water. I remember diving once and when I was a layperson, we went out in this boat and we had to dive, or maybe it was snorkeling at that time. When you dive, you get underneath, you can see all the fish and the colours and the coral reefs. But this time we were just snorkeling, and the sea was quite choppy, and it was just completely murky. We couldn't see a thing. It was fun, but, you know, pretty useless. So if your mind is restless, you're not going to see things as they are. You won't be able to see through to the bottom. And lastly, the mind of doubt is like a muddy pool of water. Yeah, it's completely brown and thick, and it takes a long time for that mud to settle before you can see anything at the bottom. So the job of samatha and vipassana at this point is to get that water clear and still. And then this ensues in sama samadhi, deep states of stillness, right samadhi, the last factor of the Eightfold Path. And that right samadhi is like a huge lake, which is completely clear, limpid, still, crystal clear, and you can see right through to the bottom. So it's the state of mind. The process of samatha vipassana has happened. Now you have the samadhi mind. And what happens then is that you can look into that water and you can see right through to the bottom. You can see the fish, you can see the pebbles at the bottom, and you have a chance to see deeply. The simile is that in the same way you have a chance to see deeply into the nature of the way things really are. Samadhi pachaya yutabhuta jnana dasana, the Buddha said. From sama samadhi, from jhanas, you have the opportunity to see things as they truly are, because now the hindrances have been completely abandoned through the practice of the Eightfold Path. So how do we develop samadhi and vipassana, samatha and vipassana, through the Eightfold Path, leading to right samadhi and seeing things as they truly are? In other words, to the deep liberating insights of mind. And I don't have too long to go through this, but we'll see what we can do. You're also very, very welcome to ask questions. We'll have about 45 minutes for questions at the end. So perhaps at that time we can go into specific meditation methods or anything that's unclear or that you'd like more detail on. But I thought it was really important to talk about the Eightfold Noble Path and also the gradual training, because much, much more than samatha and vipassana, these are the main teachings in the texts, in the Pali texts. So the Eightfold Noble Path is described in the Digha Nikaya number 22, the gradual training in many, many suttas, probably 20 suttas or so, and many of the suttas in the Digha Nikaya. One of the most beautiful places that it's described, and it's like a fleshing out of the Eightfold Path in more detail, is in the Samanya Pala Sutta, which are the fruits of the holy life. Both of these are causally conditioned sequences that arise through putting each factor carefully in place, one leading into the next and enriching the next, circling back on the other again and again. So we can go through this at any time. And the beauty of it is that you might not always think you've got time to meditate. Oh, how can I get enlightened? I don't have any time to sit and practice. My mind's all over the place. You can always be practicing 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of these factors of the path. Most of the time, if you can't meditate, if you think you don't have time, it's because you're at work or you're raising children, right? So see if you can align your work with right livelihood and really get joy from that. You're practicing that factor of the path beautifully. You're really doing good in this world. You're serving other people. You're putting other people's happiness and benefit at the front of your mind and actually doing something physical to alleviate suffering. You know, you can always have right intention. Try and find a skillful way of relating to whatever the task at hand might be. And this is going to feed your meditation practice. So when you do sit down to practice, you don't have so much work to do to start quietening the mind. So the first factor of the Eightfold Path comes under wisdom. You could say comes under vipassana. And that is right view. And as I said before, this is the basic understanding at the first level that there is suffering and that suffering is universal. It's not a personal problem. There's nothing wrong with you, and that there's an end to suffering. There's a path that leads us out of suffering, and the way out of suffering leads us to the highest happiness. I don't know, does that sort of resonate? Because when I heard those teachings, it was not an intellectual understanding for me at all. Something really clicked in the heart. And already I could see that calming quality of wisdom. Before then, I felt some kind of desperation. Why am I here? What is this for? Why do human beings cause so much unnecessary suffering for themselves and for others? Why? And if this is the way the world is, what is my role in this? What is a compassionate response? Where should I be putting my energy in life? You know, can I do anything about it, or are we just doomed? I don't know if you sometimes feel doomed or helpless about the situation in the world. When I heard these teachings, I realized I wasn't alone in this. You know, suffering wasn't my own burden to carry alone. It was something that every single living being would encounter in their life, whether they were fortunate by worldly standards or not. And yet the Buddha didn't just leave it there. He told us there was a path out. And that path can be cultivated by anybody who hears the Dhamma. So the first preliminary part of the whole Eightfold Path is wise friendship. It's coming in contact with what we know or call in Pali the the spiritual friend. And we hear the Dhamma and gain faith in that Dhamma, gain inspiration in the meaning and the goal of the Dhamma, enough to really motivate us to practice. And having seen that all beings suffer, yet desire their own happiness and recoil from pain. This is straight from the gradual training. All beings desire happiness and recoil from pain. Everybody wants to be safe. From the tiniest little creature, the creatures you're afraid of, the snakes, the spiders, the scorpions, we don't have those here. They're just trying to be safe. They're trying to find a little corner where they can live and be left at peace. Yeah? It's natural when we understand this to some extent that right motivation will arise. And this is the second factor of the path. We feel compassion, that stirring of the heart to alleviate suffering. Yes, we resonate with the pain. We might feel empathy. It might feel heavy for a while, but this wish that all beings be free from suffering starts to actually manifest in our life. And it manifests in our practice. About 3 or 4 years ago, I was meditating in Perth on my rains retreat, and a lot of suffering was coming up. I couldn't necessarily relate it to any particular thing, but it was this sense of grief and heaviness, even despair. And I thought I was being aware. I thought I was being mindful. So I was just being with it, so I thought. And then I remembered wisdom. Mindfulness also has to go hand in hand with right view, with wisdom, and with right motivation. And I realized that the way I was observing it wasn't actually calming it down at all. Remember, our practice is to calm as well as to see clearly. And so I added this sense of compassion. It's hard to describe how to do this, but it's an emotional quality of warmth, of genuine heartfelt care and tenderness. And we bring this to the way we're aware. And just by doing that, almost like embracing it, rather than trying to get rid of it, it was like giving it a mental hug, just adding that bit of warmth and comfort. And almost within a couple of minutes, it completely dissolved and gave rise to joy. I felt rapture, I felt piti going through the body and mind. And this was because of finding that right way of relating to my experience. And this is what right motivation is about. The first one is actually nekama, giving away or renouncing. Renouncing is a bit of an unpopular word in the West. Is that true? Yes, no? But you all come to a Buddhist temple where there's monks and nuns. So you know it's good, right? You know it's good. So we renounce the right things. We don't renounce things that, give us genuine, useful, wholesome happiness. We renounce the things that weigh us down. And we come to practice from the perspective of not gaining something for ourselves, but being able to give, being able to let go of what burdens the mind and actually come to practice to give. There's a story of a person in Perth, and Ajahn, my teacher, is quite famous as a teacher of jhanas, of deep samadhi, and he's practiced, very deeply on the path, not only in samadhi, but also vipassana and deep insights, which make him the compassionate teacher he is. Wisdom ensues in compassion, right? So if someone's wise, they should also be kind. So people come, and one year he laughs that it was an American guy, but we shouldn't pigeonhole people, Ajahn Brahm. But anyway, this American guy who'd heard about Ajahn Brahm's reputation came to Perth, and he was so excited to practice jhanas that he gave a huge donation of about $3,000 straight out to his friend. And after about a month of practicing, he was trying to get what he wanted, to get these states of calm. My jhanas, I paid for this. And guess what? The wisdom was missing. He was practicing to gain and not to let go. And because that wisdom faculty was missing, he didn't get his jhanas. It didn't lead to calm. And he asked for his money back. What could Ajahn Brahm do? He had to give it back. He said, oh, he left a bit for the, basic electricity and the basic costs, but I want my money back. I didn't get my bliss. Why don't we get bliss? Because we want it. We're craving. We're coming at it from a selfish, egotistical perspective, spiritual materialism. If we have these right motivations of letting go, giving, compassion, loving kindness, loving, giving without expecting anything in return, then the mind starts to quieten and calm, and we become so grateful for the smallest amount of bliss. Sometimes I talk about happiness of meditation, and people say, I don't like this subject. I don't feel bliss. I'm lucky if I can just get my mind still for 1 second. I'm like, but that's what I mean. We're not talking about, explosions in the mind or like ecstasy or rapture. We're just talking about appreciating the smallest amount of contentment that arises in the mind. Whatever you look at, whatever you regard with kindness, with gratitude, whatever you give value to starts to grow. So it's just starting to relate to things in a different way. This is the right motivation. And these are the wisdom aspects of the path. You can understand the sequence here. This leads to right virtue, right speech, right action, right livelihood, the next 3 factors of the path. If your mind is motivated with compassion, with giving, rather than acquiring, with letting go, with loving kindness, then naturally it's much more likely. It's not always going to happen, but it's much more likely that your speech and your physical bodily behavior, your job, your career is going to be aligned with those motivations. It's going to be kind. You're going to be working for the good. So when we start to live a virtuous life, we abstain from taking life, we abstain from stealing, from sexual misconduct. I don't know if the mic went off. We abstain from stealing, from sexual misconduct. We abstain from alcohol and taking drugs that cloud the mind. And we start to develop the opposites as well. When we abstain from these things, we're calming down the trouble that killing, stealing, lying, cheating bring to our lives, right? This is calm. Even though it's in the aspect of virtue here, the virtue part of the path, it creates a sense of calm. And it involves wisdom to know right from wrong, right? Samatha and Vipassana operate again. And not only that, but in the gradual training, the Buddha says we must cultivate the opposites. Don't think of monastics as just people who don't. They can't do this, they can't do that, they don't do this, they don't do that. We do so much. What we do is drop the stuff that's not helpful to the path of liberation. Then we can be incredibly confident that our speech, action, and intentions, as much as we can, are aligned with the path. So in a similar way with virtue, we start to have a lot of fun with the positive aspects. It's called charita sila, the do's. And that means instead of killing, instead of harming, we protect life. We have compassion and mercy to all living beings of every size, every shape, every background, every color, every race. Doesn't matter, they're living beings who desire happiness and recoil from pain. Yeah? With speech, we don't only abstain from false, harsh, useless and idle speech and untrue speech. We practice to speak words of truth that are beneficial, that are kind, that unite the divided, that don't divide these people from those, but bring people together in harmony and friendship. This is straight from the text. It's so beautiful. We speak words that are worth recording, that uplift the heart, that uplift the mind. and we start to develop blameless bliss. You know, when we're trustworthy in a relationship, we develop this sense of commitment, of trust, of safety for the other person. We can start to live in harmonious communities and societies. So much trouble is overcome. And as I said, this is one of the first major steps in letting go that precedes our meditation. So the last three are on samadhi, on stilling the mind. So remember that wisdom has preceded the process of stilling the mind. The next one is called right effort or endeavor. And in particular here we use wisdom again to distinguish between wholesome and unwholesome states. The Buddha said we have to prevent unwholesome states coming in and abandon the unwholesome states that have arisen. Unwholesome is not some kind of snotty judgment on your mind. It means any mental state or quality that leads to suffering. We abandon them and we prevent them coming in. How do we do that? By developing the wholesome, developing virtuous happiness in the mind, states of gratitude, inspiration, loving kindness, patience, generosity. The list is really endless. Peace, wisdom, compassion. Yeah? We bring them in, we develop them, and we maintain them. We don't let them go so easily. So even when you meditate for a couple of minutes, always remember how it feels and stay with it. That's why I said in the beginning, you know, if there's any peace or calm or any mindfulness that's arisen, even in those 5 minutes, stay connected to that. Stay connected to a sense of your body, your emotions as you listen to the Dhamma, and you'll absorb it so much more deeply. So these right efforts are about taking in the good, in particular taking in the wholesome happiness that leads to deep stillness of mind. And the Buddha said that this develops unblemished bliss, and abhyasekara sukha in Pali. And it also includes learning to work with thoughts. Okay, this is samadhi again, samatha, but it includes wisdom in discerning unwholesome from wholesome thoughts. So even the Buddha, before he became enlightened, said that he used to think thoughts, this is before he was enlightened, he had thoughts of cruelty, he had thoughts of ill will, and he had thoughts of sensual desire. The Buddha was a human being, yeah? And this is incredibly inspiring because that shows that if he could get enlightened, so can we. This is in the Buddha's life, last life, right? He had these kind of thoughts. But he also had thoughts of loving kindness, compassion, and letting go. And he realized there were these two kinds of thoughts. What if I put this kind of thought on the one side and this kind on the other? When there's an unwholesome thought, I recognize this thought leads to difficulties. It leads away from nibbana. It's not leading my mind to stillness. It's not leading to deeper insight. On the other hand, when I have thoughts of kindness, compassion, giving, letting go, generosity, it leads away from difficulties. It leads towards nibbana. And if I have these kind of thoughts, even for a whole night and day, it won't cause any trouble to me. The only thing that's left to do is to calm my mind even further to enter deep states of stillness. So he let go of even the wholesome thoughts. It's a step-by-step process. And entered deep states of calm where the thoughts were completely overcome. Yeah? And then this leads to right mindfulness. Many of us think that mindfulness is the beginning of the path. As I say, in Burma, I was conditioned to think that mindfulness, the 4 satipatthanas is the definition of that, mindfulness of body, feelings, mind and mental states, was wisdom, was vipassana. But here, mindfulness, right mindfulness, is part of samadhi in the path. And it already carries with it some wisdom. I've heard that in secular mindfulness, people talk about mindfulness as ethically neutral. But in the Buddha's teachings, mindfulness is ethically wholesome because it's preceded by sila and right view, virtue and right view. It's already imbued with wisdom, empowered by some amount of happiness, wholesome happiness of living a blameless life. And for this reason, my teacher Ajahn Brahm has a beautiful phrase. He actually calls mindfulness kindfulness. Isn't that lovely? He adds the kindness of right motivation, coming from right view to the word mindfulness. Kindfulness. How come no one thought of that before? So kindfulness is that way of looking that includes wisdom and compassion. Compassion, loving kindness is part of wisdom. It includes that in the way that it's aware, and this has great power to overcome those last hindrances. Yeah, so if sila, if virtue overcomes the coarser hindrances, right mindfulness is overcoming the last hindrances before deep samadhi can arise. And here we might practice something like breath meditation. So breath meditation in the suttas, again, is not just for calming the mind. The Buddha says that anapana sati, meditation on the breath, completes the 4 satipatthanas. It completes right mindfulness, and it leads all the way to liberation. So the first part of breath meditation is calming the mind, and in each stage you'll find that you're aware of the breath in a certain way, and gradually, as the meditation deepens, you calm that aspect of the breath. Each tetrad ends with calming the mind deeper and deeper. And finally, it leads towards insight. So it leads to freeing the mind in jhana and then to the liberating insights that arise. So we can use both samatha and vipassana in this process. If you find that your mind is too restless to stay with the breath, then perhaps more calm is needed. You can incline the mind in ways that lead to calm. Maybe you can add a perception of contentment along with the breath so that your breath actually stays, or your mind stays present to the breath. Maybe you can develop gratitude towards seeing a little bit of the breath, part of a breath before your mind jumps away. Yeah? Or if there's really a lot of restlessness, it could be due to the sila. Your virtue is not complete. So see if you can brush up your act in daily life. Yeah? This is going to help to calm the mind. If your mind, on the other hand, is sleepy whenever you try and watch the breath, maybe you don't have enough energy, maybe you don't have enough clarity of mind. So we can try to develop insight. We can try to understand more details, look more closely at the breath, investigate its nature, its qualities of impermanence, its qualities of being long or short, or cold or warm. And notice this. This is going to bring more insight and overcome that drowsiness of mind. So you're balancing calm and insight all the way. So I'm going to quickly go through to the last factor of the path, because we are hopeful that we'll have much time for questions. But this all leads towards deep states of stillness in the mind. And again, this is the last factor of the path. So sama samadhi, right samadhi of the jhanas, it's described as the 4 jhanas, is where the 5 hindrances have completely been abandoned. And because of this, remember, the 5 hindrances obscure clear seeing. They murky the water of the mind. But now the water's still. You have the chance to see things as they truly are. In order to explain this, I will read a little sutta, but first I'll describe why this is the case. And there's another passage in the suttas that says the mind that is free from hindrances is like purified gold. It's like you've melted that gold down. So you've removed the tin, the copper, the impurities of gold, and you've just got this pure gold which is soft. A mind that enters deep states of stillness is soft, just like that gold. It's malleable, it's wieldy, and it's fit for work. Not only that, but it's unbiased. It doesn't have any preference as to what it's going to see. It doesn't say, no, I don't want to see non-self. I don't want to see impermanence. This is too much for me. It's also very stable, and there's a sense of fearlessness there. The mind is so full of happiness, the happiness of letting go, the happiness of peace, the happiness of deep seclusion from the 5 hindrances and the 5 senses in deep meditation, that it's fearless, it's so satisfied. It doesn't mind what it sees, and you can turn it towards the areas of non-self, of the 4 Noble Truths, of impermanence. You can turn it towards the 5 senses to understand what these 5 senses are about. If you want, you can turn it to your past lives. This is something people do. You know, I know people who recollect their past lives, and they can understand the workings of karma in this way, because the mind is soft, but it's powerful. It's now like the lights in the football stadium. It's not your little flashlight anymore, it's a supercharged football stadium light. And you know where to look. So the little passage which comes at the end of the gradual training goes like this. When the mind is stilled in samadhi, it is purified, bright, rid of blemishes, free from taints. That's the taint of sensuality, of, let me get this right, I think it's of existence, so the craving or the taint of existence, and also of delusion. In other words, there's no more greed, hatred and delusion in the mind. It is soft, workable, steady, and attained to imperturbability. Then one bends and inclines their mind to the knowledge of the fact that these taints have been destroyed. One understands this is suffering, its origin, its cessation, and the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Just as if there were a mountain pool, crystal clear and clean, a person with good sight, standing on the bank, would see the rocks, pebbles and shells, and would see the fish swimming or resting. So one knows there's no more coming to any state of existence. So this is how samatha and vipassana work, founded on virtue and by means of practicing the Eightfold Noble Path, to deepen the stillness, to deepen the insight until it becomes sama samadhi, right samadhi, states of deep calm, jhanas, and the liberating insight that ensues, the insight that actually frees the mind. So this is my talk for you, and any questions are welcome. Okay. If you need to leave, that's perfectly fine. Toilet. Toilet break. Toilet break's also fine.
Okay, thank you. So, just to go through some etiquette on questions. For those of you online, if you could kindly indicate you'd like to ask a question by using the raise hand icon on Zoom at the foot of your screen, please. Those of you in the hall, if you could kindly indicate who'd like to ask a question. And then if you could just wait a moment, we'd like to get one of our cameras onto you. Steve, you could just indicate whether... Yep. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
Hi. I'd like to really thank you. That was wonderful. A lot to observe. Wonderful. I just wanted to ask, because there's a lot of information, but what I understood, it's like you need to be in a certain state. Please forgive me for my paraphrasing, yeah? I don't know the right words.
Don't worry.
You need to be in a certain state to then go and to then be successful again.
Okay.
To then be able to meditate. You have to come already from clearing the hindrances, and I just been in a retreat, Vipassana retreat, like full on Wat Chong Tong in Nia.
Yeah.
And you do, and from, you practice that meditation.
Yeah.
And for me, that was a way
Yeah.
to...
Absolutely.
So suddenly,
Yes.
like when I hear you say, no, you have to, then I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my God, but
No, it's not like that. Remember that this sequence is both sequential, but it also loops back around, and every factor of the Eightfold Path strengthens the other factors. So it doesn't really matter where you begin, but you do need every aspect of that path. So of course you can start with right mindfulness, which is probably where you started on that retreat. But at the same time, you'll find over time that if your virtue, for example, if you have a habit of lying or drinking alcohol or something like this, over time that will weaken the mindfulness. So you need to be cultivating that quality as well, yeah? And also paying attention, like hearing the teachings of the Buddha, having a sense of the bigger context of the path and how to practice. This is going to guide that mindfulness in the right direction. So we can really start anywhere on that path. It doesn't really matter, but it's when all those factors come together that things get much easier. And it's important to recognize that along the path, you don't need to worry about what's going to come next. Along the path, we already start to receive the benefits. The Buddha said that the Dhamma is good in the beginning, the middle, and the end. It starts bringing benefits to us from wherever we start to practice. But we do have to practice in this holistic and integrated way. So I hope that helps
thank
explain
you.
it a little bit.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
You're welcome.
Malin, this gentleman here at near the front, this one.
Thank you so much
Hi.
for your teaching. Hello. So the question is, when you try to calm your mind, means if you have good willpower, you can simply understand and you can free from your own suffering. But the thing is, the closest to you, like family, parents, it's really hard to let go of their suffering, because you are also understanding if they are going through some health problem, financial problem, even your parents, how we deal with that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, if our family are suffering, the people close to us are suffering, how do we manage? I think the first important thing is to still give yourself time to practice and to actually learn to relate to your own feelings of concern and maybe worry for them in a compassionate way. So to give yourself some compassion first of all, and to recognize that this is coming from a wish to care. But in order to care in an appropriate and effective way, we need to have some amount of stability and calm. So to give yourself those opportunities to process your own emotions, I would say, first of all, and get clear on sort of, the situation at hand, so that you can then approach it in a skillful way. And of course, when we learn to develop compassion to our own emotions, it's much easier to hold space for other people as well. And if your loved ones are suffering, you might be able to give them just a loving presence without running into fix. I think sometimes, we have this feeling that we want to fix it for others, and we can't really do that. But I know for myself that the best friends in my life are people who can just listen. People who can just hold the space without judgment, without trying to kind of make it better for me, and just give me the time to process. And I'm able to do that for others if I've learned how to stay embodied in myself and present to my own suffering. So that there's a sort of emotional boundary, but it's a soft one. It's a soft one, but I know where my world starts and also ends, and where this person's world starts and ends. So I don't have to run in to fix it. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Just checking if there's anyone online who'd like to raise a question. Please let us know by raising your hands using the Zoom icon, please.
I'm just wondering if anyone in the Zoom might also like to put it in the chat box. I don't know if that's functioning.
Absolutely, it is.
If people are shy.
So there's one from Georgia Dixon. Let me try and read this out. Bear with me. With regards to blameless bliss, how can we work with regrets from the past coming up as an obstacle now?
Yeah. super question. I'm sure everybody has that. So one way to see it, first of all, I think, is to make it a universal thing, because everybody has done things in the past that they're not proud of, that they wish they'd done better, that, you know, they keep on beating themselves up for, and, you know, you're only increasing suffering for yourself. You did the best you could do, given the conditions, given your knowledge and understanding at the time. And it wasn't only you involved in the situation, there were so many other conditions, the other person, you know, your resources at that time, your state of tiredness or resourcedness. So many things were at play, and so forgiveness is so important. Self-forgiveness and compassion. The past is the past, and it's okay to let it go. You know, in the monastic sangha, we have every 2 weeks, if we have a big enough community of 4 or more monastics fully ordained, then we have what's called the patimokkha. And at that time, we bring forward anything that we have done that we feel was not quite, you know, in line with the Buddha's guidelines for us. And we have this sense of accountability. So we tell the community, okay, I made a mistake in this way or in that way. And there is no punishment there at all. It's just a matter of acknowledging the mistake. The community give a sense of forgiveness. They also encourage us to try not to do it again. And then we let it go. Yeah? Acknowledge, forgive, and let go. So you deserve forgiveness, so be compassionate to yourself. And you know, you can also make a determination to try to learn to do it differently in future. And also tell yourself that if you fail again, fail so-called, you'll forgive yourself again. So sometimes I think we need to behave towards ourselves, treat ourselves the way we treat a child. You know, one of the things about Ajahn Brahm that I really love, and I realised after a while, is that he actually talks to people with a lot of respect. He respects everybody's capacity for awakening because he knows it's a conditioned process. It's nothing to do with a self, with an ability or capacity or any of that self stuff. But at the same time, he talks in such a loving and kind of relatable way that he's speaking to you as though you're a child. And in a sense, we all are, right? We're still growing up, so we're still learning. And just as children need a lot of encouragement, a lot of forgiveness, a lot of care, so do we. So please forgive yourself and let it go. If you can't do that straight away, one of the practices I like to do is, okay, I intend to forgive. And you can do it almost like a metta practice. So you sit at the end of a meditation maybe when you're feeling mindful, and you just bring up the idea of forgiveness and you say to yourself, I intend to forgive. May I forgive myself for whatever it is? Or I offer myself the intention to forgive and move on. I allow myself permission to make mistakes and to grow. Yeah? So find your own words, but there's no point holding on to the past.
We've got a lot of appreciative messages for you.
That's very nice.
Canda. Tarindi says, thank you, Venerable Canda. It's wonderful to be in your presence, even if online.
And yours.
Okay, please. There's a lady here in the second or third row. This one here.
Sorry, this is a
Hi.
little bit ignorant, but I was just...
No. All questions are good.
From a practical perspective,
Yeah.
you're
If you
saying...
could hold it, sorry, if you could hold it.
From a practical perspective, you're saying to integrate both Vipassana and Samatha. Like if you were going to sit for an hour, I've only ever done Vipassana, sitting like, you know, I was in Burma too, and they're kind of quite hardcore on Vipassana out there. I was just wondering how would you integrate? I mean, I did Samatha back in England, you know, but don't know how to merge the two.
Yes.
Do you do
Well,
like half an
luckily-
hour of one and half an hour
Right.
of the other? Sorry to be silly.
No, it's great because this is the question I was trying to address all along. So
right.
thank you for bringing it out so clearly. The point is that whatever you start from, whichever approach you take, you will be practicing both. You will be practicing both. Another simile that Ajahn Chah gave was it's like two sides of a hand. If you're calming the mind, you are going to see things more clearly. Remember the simile of the water. As the water gets calmer, stiller, you're able to look into it and see more deeply. As you see more deeply, You understand the nature of the mind much better. You understand how to calm it further, right? So sometimes, of course, we can emphasize one above the other. That's possible. And I think to some extent that depends partly on our own inclination. Like some people find it much easier and much more attractive to practice methods that predominantly aim to calm the mind. Other people find it much more interesting and engaging to practice with methods that examine and investigate the mind.
Screen sharing.
So it can definitely differ from person to person, from personality to personality. I was much more inclined in the beginning, or seemed to do much better with the insight practices, which were aimed at insight, right, predominantly. But as I say, calm was developing alongside it. And at some point I realized that my wisdom faculty was probably a little bit stronger than the calm. Now I'm not so sure I can compare it, because I do really believe they were developing together. But I did realize that I hadn't experienced the depth of stillness that was available through the path. So I chose to practice more samatha meditation, but in doing that I found that a lot of insight was arising again in the way to approach it. And I found that just by simply trying to hold my mind to the breath, I'd realized this a long time ago, it was so uncomfortable, it simply didn't work. And there wasn't much wisdom involved. But when I understood that, you know, by putting the causes in place for meditation to arise, the mind would find stillness by itself, then I started to really enjoy the process of calming the mind. Does this make sense? So in other words, I started to realize it's a conditioned sequence, and maybe it doesn't make sense. But basically, if I was struggling with any particular method, I would kind of backtrack and see, okay, what causes do I need to put in place, rather than just trying harder or just picking up a different method. Yeah? So it was less and less about the method and more about my approach. And one of the main principles in my practice today is to really focus on my relationship to whatever's arising in the mind. So whether the breath is there or not, whether thoughts are there or not, whether I'm doing insight practices or not, is less important than whether I'm having compassion, a sense of letting go, a sense of loving kindness. So I put my attention there. Does that make sense? And then that is a wisdom faculty, and it will lead to calm. So it's both. It's both. Yeah. But feel free to experiment in your practice. It's not like there's a right or a wrong way, and everybody's very different. The practice changes throughout our practice life. So there might be years that you're really keen on a particular method, and then at some point you realize there are some other qualities and strengths you want to develop, and another approach may be better. But every approach should be doing both. If it's not leading to more insight and more calm, then something might be amiss in the approach. Yeah?
Matthew, go ahead.
Thank you. So the question is, if someone has caused you harm,
Yeah.
and you're not able to forgive them because you don't have the capacity,
Yeah.
won't this harm your practice?
It will if you don't forgive yourself for not being able to forgive them. So you can start with yourself. Forgive yourself. Sometimes it's too much to try and forgive someone who's really harmed us. Sometimes our mind's not ready to do that. So we need to start where we are, you know. Sometimes we can't send loving kindness to the enemy. It's okay. It's the hardest person to work with. We start where it's easiest. And over time we develop inner strength. So please don't ever think you have to stretch yourself or you have to make yourself be somewhere you're not. It's about embracing your own mind and body, emotional world now, and learning to be compassionate to that. Yeah. And then you'll be progressing.
Again, another question.
Yeah.
So, is it human mind is always driven by rewards, recognition, or at least they see that something is working, driven by results. Thing is, in terms of meditation, how do you know that something is giving you result, or you are on a path that you getting something, or
for me, the way you know that you're developing in the meditation is that your actions of body and speech are improving. You're doing less harm. So it's almost like the samatha and vipassana. We talk about all these highfalutin ideas, right? We talk about deep meditation. We talk about like, you know, the highest wisdom, the perfection of wisdom, compassion and the rest. How are you living your life? If you think you're wise, if you think you're smart, but you're still kind of harming others, you're still acting like a jerk, you know. I'm sure you're not. But, you know, there's not that much wisdom there. It's not integrated. So it really should start to change the way we are in our life gradually. You know, say anger still arises, sure, you know, we're not anagamis, we're not free from anger and craving at this stage. But it should be arising less and also lasting less time. So the anger may start to dissipate more quickly. That's a sign that you're doing well. Maybe before you got angry 8 times out of 10, now you get angry 7 times out of 10. Fantastic. One time you're creating no harm. So small steps, but over a longer period, there should be a general trajectory whereby your actions of body and speech are becoming increasingly supportive, harmless, encouraging, loving, compassionate. And then you know your practice is on the right track. That's the best way.
Thank you.
You can actually ask the people around you as well, if you really want to, but don't criticize, you know, give yourself time. Yeah. If I'd have asked my parents in the beginning, I'm sure they'd have said, gosh, you just think she's better than us, you know, always talking about meditation, like, as if we don't do anything good. I don't do that anymore. So now I think they've realized, yeah, I committed to this, something must be working for me. And they've realised I've matured. So,
Okay, we've got Charanjit. Yeah, can we just go online and then we'll come back to you? Just give me a second. Charanjit, I wonder if you could ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Ajahn, for a very full explanation, but I'm still struggling with 1 or 2 things. You mentioned doubt, and I just want to know, do you ever have doubt and how do you deal with it?
Do I ever have doubt personally?
Yeah.
Doubt, proper doubt is fully overcome through the experience of the Dhamma.
Mm-hmm.
So the fetter of doubt, of kind of knowing and sensing and having some experience of the Four Noble Truths, is still there until stream winning. So I'm not allowed to say where I am, but basically it's natural to have doubt. So by coming to listen to a Dhamma talk, you're not going to understand everything about samatha vipassana, you're not going to overcome the hindrances completely, but the idea is that by exposing ourselves to the teachings of the Buddha, we become clearer and clearer about the path. Mm-hmm. We can't actually understand the path before we try and walk on it. So again, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to fall off, mm-hmm. You're going to get confused. It's part of the process, and that's okay. So sometimes we overcome doubt by actually giving something a go, taking a step. You take a step, does it work, does it not? Okay, adjust it slightly this way, slightly that way. Okay, I think I'm on the path, great, I'm on the path for a bit. Oh, I'm going left, go right, okay. Oh, I'm going too far right, come back to the left. Apparently Ajahn Chah used to be criticised sometimes. They used to say, oh, you know, he keeps giving different instructions. He told this one to go left, he told this one to go right. Which one? Well, if you're going too far to the right, I'm telling you to go to the left. If you're going too far to the left, I'm telling you to go to the right. So experiment for yourself. But the best way to overcome doubt at this stage is to keep on learning the teachings of the Buddha, associate with spiritual friends, and also not just listening to the Dhamma, but asking questions, which you're doing, and also discussing the Dhamma to clarify doubts. So we all have doubts to some degree, but little by little they do dissipate, and the doubts may be kind of subtler. I don't really have a doubt about the Buddha's teaching or the Dhamma or, yeah. But I'm sure that there's a deeper level of faith that's yet to come.
Thank you.
There was another question here. Yeah.
Is there a difference between the mind's desire to commit violence and to be capable of committing violence? And as I ask this, I see a spear in one of the photos. Is there any wisdom in lethal tools tied to the first question.
So is there any difference between like wishing to create harm and actually creating it? Is that what you were asking? Being capable of it. The thing is, unfortunately, we're all capable of it, right? We're all capable of it, and we have to be so careful, because depending on what we expose ourselves to, we're more likely to commit harm. So we should never think that other people who are violent or who use lethal weapons, even in very obviously intentional ways, are different from us. They've just been exposed to the wrong kinds of people, the wrong kind of input, you know. Maybe they got caught up with, I don't know, like a kind of radical group of religious fundamentalists. Any one of us is susceptible to that. There's really no difference, and that's why we have to be very, very careful about the input that we take in. Yeah, everything in our mind is conditioned, entirely conditioned. Of course, some people may be more inclined that way, but, you know, things could change for us given the circumstances. So obviously there's a difference between intending harm and actually doing it, and hopefully if we have enough mindfulness and we see those kind of unwholesome thoughts coming up, we can, you know, maybe laugh at them actually. We can't always get rid of them, but we can say, okay, this is a thought, like I'm not going to listen to this. In the Buddha's teachings of the enlightened monks and nuns in his day, they had this phrase, I see you Mara, or I know you Mara. It means this is an unwholesome thought or a not very wholesome intention, and it's kind of this naughty Mara. It's like the personification of, I don't know, sort of the devil or sort of all things bad. It's like, oh, that thing, that kind of influence is now in my mind. I see it. And as soon as you see it, it tends to disappear. You know, it's like there's a distance there, there's some awareness there, and you have a chance to pause and decide what you want to do. Yeah. Does that help? Sort of the question.
Yeah, we're going to have two more questions, and then we're probably going to wrap up.
His hand up a while.
Bear with me.
Hi. I don't know if you can see me. So yeah, my question is around practicing through your work. So I get a lot out of helping those who are suffering. My work's conducive to that.
Fantastic.
And I'm able to work in that way, and I touch into that feeling that you described, and it's very fulfilling.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, and it's pure, and it's all those things that you want it to be. And then I have to monetize it.
You had to monetize it.
Yeah, and that's where it becomes heavy,
right.
and it almost becomes a rub, which takes away from the purity of what I was doing, and I'm then having to take money from these people. And it's almost balancing living in this world, this modern world, with the practice. And I don't know if you have any insight into that.
Yeah, it is the kind of world we live in. I guess one thing is to recognize that you have basic human needs. You too count. You can help alleviate others' suffering, but if you don't have anywhere to live, if you don't have enough to eat, then how can you continue? So you do need to earn a livelihood, and it's wonderful that you do that through wholesome means. Sometimes we start to think we've got to charge the market rate, even though we do know that it's a bit expensive, and we do kind of start to see greed slipping in. So sometimes maybe it's possible to give some reduction to some people. I don't know what kind of work you do. I mean, it might not be that kind of job. But we can still do things for others outside of that as well, you know, where we do cater to people maybe from marginalised communities or people of lower incomes who don't have the means to actually, you know, pay to support your livelihood in the same way. But I think to recognise that that is the reality. I mean, it's the same for monks and nuns. You know, we also need to receive dana, you know, in terms of financial resources, material resources, food. If we didn't have food, if we didn't have someone paying for our train ticket, then I couldn't come here today. So this has to happen. And it's a give and a take. Maybe they're happy to be paying for something. You know, maybe they're happy to be, you know, putting their money where, you know, into somebody who's doing good. So I think to try to reconnect with a sense of joy that your livelihood brings you is important. And the Buddha had a method that he very much encouraged called Silanusati or Chaganusati. And it is a reflection or a recollection. It's a kind of mindfulness that brings up in your own mind the good that you've done. So at the end of the day, when you've been working in your livelihood that you enjoy, instead of focusing on the fact that, okay, people had to pay, I had to monetize it, etc. Wow, you know, I can do something like this that's so coming from such a good place and I can earn my livelihood. I'm not doing that through unskillful means. And think about all the ways that you've been helping people. Really go through it. Remember someone's face, the sense of relief, a sense of like rekindling hope in a person who maybe had lost hope and then met someone kind. Think of the actual concrete ways you've been helping and allow happiness to arise. This is so beautiful because that is the kind of wholesome joy that you can put straight onto your meditation. So if you begin your meditation that way, then you'll find your mind does start to calm and feel some uplift, and you'll find the meditation much easier.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry, can we get the microphone?
John's here who gave me the Stella.
It just keeps going all the time. Is it okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Hold it closer to you, ma'am.
Is it, we've been always talking about calm and peace and all these things. But then how did a group of 19 monks develop a physical endurance to walk from Texas to Washington?
Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah, that was amazing. So we're talking about the group of monks, I think about 30 monks, was it?
Is it 19 monks actually walk from Texas to Washington?
Yeah, they
walk
and
they have done the same similar walk on the paths of actually Buddha in India from all the places, that from Varanasi to Buddha Gaya and all those places, proving that actually Buddha really walked, not actually was doing anything else, but actually taken time to walk. So they did this in 108 days, 2,300 miles, and that is physical endurance. So can with mindfulness, can we do that?
Well, I mean, yeah, so we're talking about the group of monks who walked from Texas to Washington, D.C. It was called a walk for peace. And I do believe they trained very carefully for that. So mindfulness was definitely involved. They would have had to be mindful of a lot of pain. They'd have had to be mindful in the sense of discerning of the dangers on the way. They would have had to be mindful in the sense of maintaining a kind of very wholesome intention, right? Understanding the purpose of what they were doing. That's a kind of mindfulness, sati sampajanya. And having a lot of compassion as well, so wisdom as well. And as you say, you know, people have been doing this in the monastic life for thousands of years. There was also a group of up to 500 nuns. They were not nuns yet, but women from the Sakyan clan who walked from, I think, Kapilavatthu all the way to Vaishali to ask the Buddha for their ordination in the Buddha's day. And they walked barefoot. These were women who'd been brought up in a palace, very delicate. Their feet were bleeding. They must have been exhausted. And they didn't know if they'd be, you know, accepted or not. And they did this out of compassion, out of anukampa for the world. So yeah, certainly the monks who did this would have had a certain degree of mindfulness, of commitment, a great degree of compassion. And I think they brought a lot of peace to people throughout the world. Yeah, so thanks for reminding us of that. Did I actually answer the question? I'm not sure exactly. Did I answer the question?
Yes.
Yeah? Or was there something more to that?
But my question was, can we develop mindfulness into that extent?
Can we develop mindfulness to that extent? I mean, that's an interesting question. Obviously, it depends on physical ability to some degree, right? But I don't see why not. I don't see why not. I mean, sometimes it's not that we have to first have the mindfulness, then only we do it. Sometimes you're training on the job. You know, you start something with a very strong intention, with a bit of training, but then you kind of understand what it is you're doing when you're actually doing it. That's what I found out in starting a monastery. I had no idea. I mean, you don't go to, you know, you don't do a degree in how to be an abbot or how to be a bhikkhuni or any of that. You just take the plunge through faith, through, you know, deep intention to try and do good, and then learning on the way. taking it step by step. So I do believe that people can do this if they wish. And we don't have to do 2,300 miles, right? We can do a day walk. I understand there have been lots of walks for peace since then, smaller walks, week-long walks, whatever it is you can do. You know, anything that can bring the message of peace to more and more people, I think, is incredibly compassionate. So we don't always have to like go for the 2,300 miles, but certainly where there's a good intention, there's a way. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think we've just about wrapped it up.
Okay, so who's going to do a peace walk now?
Okay. So, if I could just make a few comments. Thank you so much, Ajahn Canda, for a very illuminating talk, principally about the Noble Eightfold Path, which I think is always the best topic for a talk, because that was the talk that obviously the Buddha, the first sermon really was about the Noble Eightfold Path and the middle path to liberation. So I think that really was a very powerful talk, if I may say, and I think a very engaging one. And we look forward to you coming to the Vihara on another occasion. So Ajahn Canda has very kindly also mentioned that Ajahn Brahmali may well be coming to London Buddhist Vihara when he's next on a tour of the UK, and at the end of it, he'll be coming to London Buddhist Vihara sometime in June, and more of that will be circulated to everyone prior to that. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank a lot of people, actually, who've come together to put this event on. We had a talk with Ajahn Canda a few weeks ago, if I remember rightly, trying to get this event put together. And it took a lot of planning and arrangements, because Ajahn Canda lives near Oxford. And I think she's also suffering from a little bit of a sore throat. So we're even more grateful that she came today and gave such a very good talk. As I said, there are a lot of people who've come together to put these events on. I'm extremely grateful for all of those people. I know that today, from judging by the comments in the chat, that our sound on Zoom hasn't been as best as it should have been to everyone. And we're probably going to have to look at and review that amongst ourselves. We have got a new internet service at the Vihara, which hopefully is a much stronger service than the one we've had in the past, and that should help us. But I notice still that there are some challenges that we need to overcome. Nevertheless, I would like to stress that we have a very strong team and a very talented group of supporters and volunteers who support all the events that we put together. And I'd like to thank especially people like Graham, Steve, Marlinda, Rajitha, who have helped enormously today and continue to support the British Mahabodhi Society in London Buddhist Vihara. We have some refreshments organized for the people in the Vihara, and please wait for that. And I'm sure that Ajahn Canda will stay behind to answer any questions that you have personally and to meet with you all as well. Our next event for the British Mahabodhi Society is on the second Saturday in April. And we're delighted to say that we're hopeful of Dr. Stefania Shavanyan, who leads the Center for Buddhist Studies at SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies, who will be giving us a talk connected to Chinese or Buddhism in China and also its links to our founder, Anagarika Dhammapada. So we're really looking forward to that. And there'll be other talks, obviously, coming up. This is our centenary year at London Buddhist Vihara. So I would encourage you, if you haven't already done so, to be on our mailing list so that you can be properly informed of our future events, including our centenary events. The work of our Vihara goes on a daily basis, including meditation sessions led by Venerable Sila Vimala and our visiting monk, Buddha Dasa, who's here with us today as well. We have meditation sessions on Tuesday mornings, Wednesday evenings, and Saturday afternoons. And we also have a retreat, a meditation retreat, on the last Saturday of every month. Without further ado, and I know you're all tired, I'd like to bring this evening to a close and thank you all for attending. Without you, this event would be meaningless. So thank you again. Have a lovely evening. Have a great Mother's Day tomorrow, if that means anything to all of you. And thank you for attending. Thank you.